So this video is for those of you that missed the lecture on Chapter 7 notes. And what you're going to want to do is from the handout folder, grab this file or grab the folder here that says Chapter 7 and 8 notes. And if you open it up, you'll have these classes. Now before I talk about what we're going to do here, I want to show you from the book what we're going to do. Today we're going to look at items like these are all animals, and we have to figure out what are some things that they have in common, and we're going to factor those out into something called a superclass. So I'm going to just go to the next page here, and you'll see I've made a superclass called animal, and each of them has some instance variables and they have some methods. So it's things that they know and things that they do. The animal has a picture. Each animal has a unique picture. It has some sort of food level, or it has a food that it likes to eat. It has some sort of hunger level. There are boundaries that it lives in, or a location that it lives in. And each of them makes some sort of noise, eats, sleeps, and roams. The beauty of setting it up this way is if I write all the code in my animal class, and then I make these subclasses of lion, hippo, tiger, dog, cat, and wolf, that all of these subclasses, like lion, inherit all of these items. So all the code that I wrote in animal goes into lion. All the code that I wrote in animal goes into hippo. That's the basics of what we're doing in Chapter 7. And let's go ahead and do it. So I'm going to examine my three classes that I have here. I have cat and dog and fish. And what I'm looking for is the things that they have in common. And if you look, you'll notice the first two variables, name and sound. Name and sound, they're in all three of these classes, name and sound. What about the methods? Well, next is constructor, and the constructor is going to be different, but I've got a get name, a speak, and a toString. If I look here, I've got a get name, a speak, and a toString. If I look here, I've got a get name, a speak, and a toString. And they're all the same. So what I'm going to do is take all of this code and put it into one superclass. So to get started, I'm going to make a new class, and I'm going to call it pet, because each one of these, a cat, a dog, and a fish, they're all pets. So I'm going to call my class pet. And public class pet. And I'm going to start by just grabbing items that I know I need. So I'm just going to go to my cat class. I'm going to grab these two variables and paste them in here. Next thing that they all have in common are all of these methods. So I'm just going to copy these methods and paste them in here. At this point, I want to remind you of things that go in a class. When you are making a class, which there's always an AP question about making a class. So the first thing you would start with is your instance variables, which that's what I have here. So that's the first thing that you would do. The second thing would be a constructor. I don't have a constructor yet, but I'll make one. The third thing is any methods that I need. And I always like to include step 4. Technically this is a method, but we got to write a toString. And toString lets you print the class. So let's see what I have. Instance variables, yeah, I have instance variables. Methods and a toString, I have those things. I have some methods and a toString that I just copied from my other classes there. I'm missing a constructor. I'm going to put it in the order. So it goes instance variables, constructor, right in here. Public pet. And I want whenever I make a pet, I want to set my name and sound. So I'm going to say string name, comma, string sound. Now in building this constructor, I did something I told you not to do in the past. Here I've got a name variable, here I have a name variable. And normally we do something like the name. But I want to show you something new, or just remind you of something. You would want to, problem with having the same variables here is the compiler gets confused. When you say name equals name, it doesn't know which name you're talking about. So we're just going to tell it. We're going to tell it on the left here by using the keyword this. If I do this dot name equals name, it's going to work. And here's why. This refers to this class. So this dot name goes to this class and looks for a name variable. There it is. So this variable is now this variable. My other variable is just the argument that's coming in here. And this is going to allow you to work it. Now, I still like to change the variable name, but you'll see it this way on the AP exam. That's why I wanted to show it to you now. And then my other one, this dot sound equals sound. So now I have my superclass. It's called pet. And what I want to do is make subclasses out of my other three classes here. And you're going to do the same thing on each of these. I'm just going to show you on one, and then I'll skip ahead and show you that the other two are done. So I'm going to start with my cat here. I'm going to do a couple things about with cat, but the first thing is I want to make it a subclass of pet. And all you have to do is in the header say extends pet. If I were to compile this, there's going to be an error, but it draws this little arrow and it's showing that cat is a subclass of pet. And by making it a subclass, it's going to inherit everything from pet. So because it inherits these two variables, I'm going to delete them out of the cat class. I no longer need those. But look, there's a variable here for the cat that's unique to the class. That's unique to the cat class. Because I wouldn't ever declaw a fish, so it doesn't make sense to have that in the fish. But I could declaw a cat, and so it's unique to the cat class. I'm going to keep that. We'll come back to the constructor in a second. But each of these methods is also in the pet class. So I'm going to delete them. So my pet class is quite simple right now. It just has a unique instance variable for cat, and it has a constructor. My constructor is not quite correct. If I compile it, I get an error down here that says pet in class pet cannot be applied to the given types. Basically, it's saying your constructor cannot be applied to the given types. And here is why. Once you start making subclasses, there has to be a constructor in the subclass that matches the constructor here. And here's how you do it. Notice this has this constructor in pet takes in 2 arguments. But when I made my cat, there's 3 arguments. What we're going to do, type it right here, we're going to call the pet constructor. You do that by typing the word super and then sending in the correct number of arguments. This takes in name and sound. So that's what I'm going to send it. I'm going to send it name, comma, sound. And I want to explain what's happening here. So this runs the constructor. In the superclass. Hence the name super. So it looks up to the superclass. Well, what's the superclass? Pet. And, well, it runs the pet constructor based on the arguments that I gave it. And I gave it the name and sound. Also, you should know that when you do this, super must be the first line in the constructor. So super has to be the first line. My cat constructor starts, and I need this call to super. And then I can set any other instance variables that I want. Now I'm going to add one thing here. I'm going to put a print line in here because we're going to need this. So I'm just going to say made a cat object. And I'm going to copy this line because I need it in my pet class. This is just going to show you kind of how things are being created. In my pet constructor, I'm going to make this the very last line. And I'm going to compile each of these. There should be no errors. Now, at this point, you should do the same thing that we just did with the cat class to dog and fish. I'm gonna skip ahead of that right now. Okay, so you can see that I've made my dog class and my fish class subclasses of pet, which was my super class. And I did that by using the word extends pet. I also, on each of these, updated my constructor. I kept the variable that was unique to that class, and then I made sure it said made a dog object instead of cat object or pet object. And the same thing with fish, extends pet. I kept the variable that was unique to fish, and I updated the constructor. Okay, I'm going to compile all that. That's all good, except I forgot to, in my pet class, this is supposed to say made a pet object. There. So I'm going to compile these all again, and it all works. Now, next we're going to get into the driver here, and we're gonna do some work with these classes, but that'll be in part 2 of the video. This video is getting a little long, so I want to move on. I want to do a part 2. So go ahead and find that video.